very much for your presentation. I might start by addressing my question to Mr. Bork. I'd like to tell you, and I'm sure you've heard, that some witnesses and experts have told us that we have nothing to worry about when it comes to cannabis home growing, because it amounts to little more than tending to a plant at home. And it's no different than a house plant. We've even heard that it's good therapy to grow plants. So 4 plants per household, on the face of it, mightn't sound so bad. And I understand that the bill places no limits on the size of the plants. So if you could perhaps paint a picture for us of what this might actually look like in a home. So you have 4 plants, what, in a small corner, or could it be in a whole room? How much, I think you alluded to how much 4 plants could actually produce in a year, but you might tell us again. And also, could 4 plants sustain a commercial grow operation?
Thanks. There's a lot of questions in there, so let me try and unwrap it a little bit. I think the amount that I said was 5 kilograms. That's based on growing plants very quickly, because you can use lights and fertilizer and grow them. There's no limit on the size of growth. It could be the size of me. It's not unusual for a plant to be that big. There's no limit to the width of it. What realtors have seen in homes is typically where there have been more than 4 plants grown. But as the constable was saying, they won't have the resources to monitor whether somebody is growing 5, 6, 7 plants. So I think the point from a housing standpoint is that you're going to see damage to the home. And this might have been overlooked by a home inspector, and then the second owner gets this house, and then the home inspector finds a problem, and you could devalue the house. And then the problem within a rental context is that shared ventilation systems, and where you're growing marijuana, you're going to smoke marijuana, and then you're going to create all kinds of problems. And I think that's reflected in the police suggesting that there's going to be many more service calls. What I think is important, though, is to really just address the mythology that seems to exist, that there's going to be a sort of benign approach to this, the sort of aging hippie who's growing their own plant, to smoke it. In BC, the BC Hydro folks found that there were 40,000 dwellings operating grow ops, and that's in an environment where it's illegal. And I think you can safely expect that people are going to take advantage of the fact that it's legal to grow plants, and they're going to do so in a way that isn't necessarily safe. So they'll have perhaps electrical problems and other things that will arise as a result of not knowing what they're doing. And, it really comes back to the government, was elected with a promise to legalize, but the fact is home growing is a whole different thing, and it unleashes all kinds of problems that have been identified. Some of them have been identified today, and yet I don't see the solution that it's providing.
I presume that in a multi-unit residential building, this would be an issue not only for condo owners, for example, but also for for landlords who rent apartments.
Well, I think what would happen is it's not a stretch to suggest that landlords who have rental buildings will try to convert those to condominiums where they can have more control over what goes on within the building, and then that will decrease the rental stock, which is already in places like Vancouver and Toronto at a premium, and there are more Canadians who are lower income that rent than own, and so they are disproportionately affected by these kinds of policies.
Okay, do I have any more time?
Well, you got half a minute.
Okay, I might just, if I could just move over to the police chiefs for one moment, and then on my second round I'm going to come back at you if I could. But you talked about this being unenforceable. And, we're just hearing now about what we could find in a home or in multi-unit buildings. So could you just speak quickly, and then I hope to come back to it, about what you meant in more detail?
So very briefly, I mean, as far as a priority for us to attend, if we were to receive information that someone was growing 5 plants or 6 plants versus the legal 4, where that would be a priority for law enforcement, and certainly as legalization unrolls, we have a lot of other priorities, and namely organized crime and more of the larger scale. So for the most part, it would be a low priority call for law enforcement, and it would be very resource intensive as well. So I'll leave it at that and await your next question.
Okay, let me move on.